Hello, everyone. Welcome to Far From Just Words. I am Akumbe. The topic today is about spoken word poetry. I had this conversation that I have with friends because I like it. That's my muse, and I like conversations and debate too, especially when I meet with friends that we could share. And he was talking about what is this new thing that you guys talk about, like spoken word poetry, sit on camera and act and all that. And I was a little bit triggered, and I was like, people don't understand. Maybe he didn't, he wasn't fascinated by it to do it like me, I'm doing today, like what I'm doing today. But I had to refer him back. I said, first of all, let me get into a rabbit hole for a moment. Most of the writers back then had to be curriculum writers to even make it, to make a living out of it. Because the system in Cameroon at the time, you had to be an engineer, a lawyer, or a banker or something. There was no place for a writer. You're a poor man. It's like, you study history. How come? So it was that kind of a place. So now, back to the topic. Spoken word poetry wasn't something that was strange to Africans or Cameroonians specifically, since I grew up in Cameroon and I studied it, literature in a high school and middle school. It was always there. Okay, one of my teachers, Mr. D, that made me like poetry in high school, that he did made the Xhosa and all the Canterbury Tales and the African poetry, that actually made me like African poetry or poetry as a whole, was because he explained it over and over again. African poetry has no stanzas and shape. It has no shape. Let me just put it like that. There's not 4-4-4 or 3-4-3-4 or 4-4-4-3-4-4-3. There's no shape. It wasn't about rhythms. It wasn't about saying a fry egg, fry this or fry that. No, it wasn't about that. Because why? African poetry also comes from something called history. There's a history behind it. We came from slave trade. We came from civil wars and tribal wars. So when the African poet was writing, he's writing from pain. He's writing from somewhere. He didn't have time to write about something that he had to sit down and measure it. Years later, we had other African poets that did it in that manner, in their own manner, but not specifically like the Shakespearean poetry. Now, but wasn't that poetry? It was poetry. We always did African poetry. We always did spoken word poetry. But the thing is, we had to catch up to understand with the terminology of the media that referred to it as spoken word poetry. But we didn't know about it in that name, in that reference. But now we know that it's the same. Someone like me, I know I've done this. I heard about, I know this. This is what it is.